Dr. Umar Johnson critiques the church. A full response coming right up.
Right, and so they're fighting not only.
There was a Trinity Radio episode.
Because you guys preach stuff that is like literally unrecognizable to an ancient African.
It's urban apologetics. You know what I'm saying? I got Sean Black, didn't he, with the gospel?
What up? What up? You know what it is, man. Tru-ID Apologetics. You got the real Adam Coleman in the building. Got some guests right here. You know what I'm saying? What's up? What up, MJ? What's happening with you, bro?
What's going on, dude? It's always a pleasure when we get to come on your channel. Usually when we're coming on your channel, it's to do something that's pretty extraordinary.
Oh, man. Well, you know, folks will see in just a minute, man. We won't get into that, man. But, you know, speaking of extraordinary, we also have apologists in Detroit. Chris Samuel in the building.
Man, if you didn't mention my name, I would have no clue who you was talking about.
Yo, real talk. So here's the thing, man. You might be, I got to go back and check the archives. You might be the first guest to repeat in 2 consecutive episodes. Because, like, my last episode, I had you dialoguing with Samuel Say. Now I got you, you know what I'm saying, here with my man MJ Jackson. You might be the first, bro. You might be the one and only. I'm saying to double it up. You know what I'm saying?
All right. Well, it's an honor and a privilege, but at the same time, I love my anonymity. So I'm trying to be just well known enough that people tune in, but not so well known that I get bothered when I go places.
Okay, bro, you want to hit him with that sniper shot. You want to be out here sniping cats on YouTube. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? We'll see how that plays out here in a second. So you know, we got a meaty discussion. Your boy. Dr. Umar Johnson is at it one more again. You know what I'm saying? He's been a faithful criticizer of the church, and he has been persistent, and he continues to speak out. And I think to some extent, maybe he feels like he's been misunderstood, and maybe he's trying to clear the air or bring clarity to his position. But nevertheless, he's got some critiques for the church in a recent video that came out on, I think it was like Truth TV, I believe it was the YouTube channel that he was on. So, you know, we're going to play some clips from that in a second and just dig into his critiques, because here's my thing, man. And I'm going to toss it to y'all to get your thoughts. But my perspective is when somebody, I think that we have to take at least some critiques seriously. You know what I'm saying? Like, some critiques are so bad, they're just not even really worth our time. But, you know, I do think that when you have somebody who has a public platform and is spreading ideas about the church and about Christianity, and that person has a great deal of influence, then on that basis alone, I think that it's worth our while to take their criticism seriously, not just giving a response, but also really being thoughtful in our responses and providing evidence and reason to address their concerns. You know, so that's kind of what brings us here today with respect to Dr. Umar Johnson. I got a lot to say about the video. But I want to get you guys' thoughts, you know, just kind of before we get into some of the clips, just kind of get you guys' thoughts about, you know, Dr. Umar Johnson and your initial thoughts having watched the video, the interview yourselves. Like, what are you guys' thoughts on it? What do you think about Chris? I'm starting with you, bro, since you're the returning champ, since you're the, you're the back-to-back champion, you know what I'm saying, here at Tru-ID. We'll start with you first, bro.
Yeah, okay. It was not entertaining in the sense that, you know, it was exciting. It was entertaining in the sense that, like, I was like in utter disbelief. It was like mouth dropping at so many different points. I felt like he was kind of feeling it. First of all, I feel like he'd been watching some of our videos, because like there was early on in the video, he seemed to be walking very cautiously. And then I think that he caught himself a couple of times and talking about white Jesus versus black Jesus. And he kind of went back and forth. And so I feel like, okay, he's been listening to some apologetics. He's been listening to some of his critiques, and he's trying to adapt his message to address some of the critiques that has been levied against him. So instead of thinking of Jesus as just white Jesus, now he's willing to acknowledge his Jesus as black, and now he's integrating that into his message in a way that he can push his narrative. So A, it sounds like he's been listening. B, in spite of the fact that he's been listening, I mean, like, he's in the competition for most arrogant, confident person. There's times where he comes off as like God. I mean, are you God? Like, he seems to have perspective, that he seems to have prescient perspective where he knows what all of reality is all about.
Right.
And so
he knows what other people are thinking.
Yeah, he's critiquing
their motivations. I was like, come on, bro, dang.
Right. He knows all the, like, hey, all the churches in America aren't doing anything anymore ever since the civil rights. And I just like immediately thought to myself, like, okay, was it Brooklyn Tabernacle, Oak Cliff? I'm like, I thought of two big churches that's doing great stuff right off the top of my head. At the end of the video, he's kind of talking about how when he gets asked the question, we're a quarter of the way into this century, like, who's leading the way in and doing the type of work that he values and that he thinks is necessary. And he goes, what's his name? Right, Stevenson, right? Just Mercy. And I'm like, he's a Christian. You just gave all of these critiques. You started off talking about Christians aren't doing anything like they used to. And then the only person that you can think of, first person comes to mind, is a Christian that's acting on his Christian conviction. So yeah, he's sawed off the branch he was sitting on like 50 times in this video. So again, it was entertaining in the sense that, like, I mean, you're in utter disbelief that a guy with that posits and thinks of himself and presents himself as an intellect makes such simple logical missteps. It was entertaining from that perspective. It was clear that he's been listening to some critiques and trying to adapt his message to reflect some of the misconceptions that he's had about Christianity. But in spite of that, my goodness, this dude just made grandiose claim after grandiose claim after grandiose claim, half of which cannot be either confirmed or denied. I mean, it was just crazy. So that's kind of my initial thoughts of it. Last comment I'll make is this.
Oh no, good.
Toward the end of the video, he was talking about Stevenson. If Stevenson's married to a white woman, that he's going to snatch his little award back away from it. And along the way, he was kind of talking about the virtue and the significance of marriage and family in fixing some of these problems. And then he talks about the fact that he's 40, and I'm like, well, why ain't you married? Weren't you in the news like a year ago talking about you a polygamist, and when you get married, you're gonna marry at least two? And I'm like, one would be nice. Yeah. Like, you're a viable man. One would be nice. Just marry one and do your part, buddy. Do your part. Okay, that's my one little personal shot. This guy's got all of the answers for human flourishing and what's righteous, and he's got all of the answers, all of the answers for religion, and yet here he is, just like a glaring hypocrite and oxymoron of his own values and his own beliefs. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts about this video.
No, I'm right there with you. I'm glad you, especially that last part. I'm going to go to hear to you in a second, MJ, but I think one of the biggest pieces that to me stood out is, I mean, aside from the fact that the man is kicking some real pseudoscience at one point, and we'll get into that, and it was like shockingly bad. But aside from that, is that when it comes to the values that Dr. Umar wants to hold with respect to justice and seeing things play out rightly, for Black people, and all of these kind of morally laden ideas. The reality is, it seems like he just really doesn't have a worldview that can account for these ideas, and therefore he ends up making statements that are contradictory, like, because he doesn't have a coherent worldview. I think it will kind of come out, as we talk a little bit. But you can take snippets of what he says, and when you just really say, okay, well, do these ideas work together? Like, he's constantly, like you said, just cutting off that tree branch that he's sitting on, and I think it's really because he just doesn't have a coherent worldview. Really, at the outset, I think the gentleman, and forgive me, I can't remember the interviewer's name, but he asked, Dr. Umar, what is his worldview or something to that effect, and then he kind of skipped his own question, and they never like really got around to it for real. Now I do know that in a recent Breakfast Club interview, he said that he subscribes to Yoruba spirituality. Like I guess he's like a priest in some sort or something like that. In regard to Yoruba form of African spirituality, and we can get into that a little bit. But nevertheless, I would argue is that the reason why he's constantly sawing off that tree branch is because he doesn't have a coherent worldview. And the values that he wants to hold don't fit together snugly in the worldview that he holds, and it comes out. And he's so boisterous about it. You know what I'm saying? Like everything he says with a conviction, which to a degree I respect. I respect somebody who has strong conviction. I don't have a problem with that necessarily. But when you're strong and wrong or strong and incoherent, then it's not really doing our people a whole lot of good. But MJ, before we get into some of the clips, man, like what are your thoughts or initial impressions having watched the video? Oh, I'm sorry, Chris, you want to say something?
He acknowledged at the end of the video that he's conscious community. When he asked him what his religious belief was at the end of the video, he said he's conscious community. So I felt like that was the most accurate thing he said in probably the entire thing.
Okay, all right, fair enough. MJ, what you got, man?
Yeah, I'll save most of my comments for the video so we can get into it. Okay. But the dude, like you said, he's strong or wrong, but he's a cultural relativist. Yeah. I remember you had did a critique of him on your podcast. And he was kind of talking about that anybody who engages in interracial marriage does not have his respect. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, so right? Like, dude, who are you? But he's out of his lane on a lot of things, right? Yeah. And look, I get that people bring him in to talk about the school to prison pipeline. And let's just be real about it. Umar, if you watch this video, I want you to know that a lot of the things that you have said, Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu already said it in the 80s when you were in high school. Just to be anybody can go look on YouTube and pull up videos by Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, who wrote about the conspiracy to destroy black boys. Like this stuff is not original. And I hate to break it, but it's just that YouTube has been a vehicle to put out these ideas, this information, and things like that. But even that is not unique. So I think Dr. Umar Johnson, he is a scholar in his lane. But when you start thinking that you can comment on politics, when you start thinking that you can comment on ethics, when you start thinking that you can comment on religion, he even made comments about religion and race and religion and politics, dude. Like we can't allow people to be strong and wrong and think that's impressive. Like just because you got some charisma, right? Just because you're a charismatic individual, we got to be willing to and that we have to be willing to question some of these things to see if they are coherent, to see if they are logical, to see if they are contradictory. We got to be willing to not be so entertained and really sit down and think about these things. Because some of it just doesn't make sense.
No, it's a fact, man. And before we get into it, and I know we want to get to the video, got a lot to say about it, but I think part of the issue with me is that there are certain things I agree with him on. Like when it comes to the importance of pursuing justice, 100%. When it comes to specifically, in regards to racism, that I do believe to be, problematic today. You know what I'm saying? I think there's good evidence to suggest that you still have expressions of systemic racism that need to be addressed today. I'm 100%, with, going after that and addressing the inconsistencies in a system. And I think any Christian should be, regardless of where you find yourself. You know what I'm saying? We should always be pushing for the biblical ethic, which will put you at odds with the systems of this world, one way or the other. So I'm 100% with that. But to your point, MJ, is that for me, at the same time, I can't allow things that I agree with to be a Trojan horse for bad ideas. So even though we may agree on point A, B, and C, once you start getting into the irrational claims that are not well substantiated, overgeneralizations, like all the kind of things that he does throughout this interview, I can't take that hook, line, and sinker just because I agree with you on this one point over here. If we're going to be critical thinkers, I think the Black community, quite frankly, just to be explicit, we can't afford to not think critically. I'm saying we can't afford it. We can't afford to have people who were allowed strong and wrong being thought leaders in our community, and we just take it at face value. We can't afford it because of the spot that we're in. You know what I'm saying? And so therefore, if I'm engaged in the work of, and the ideas of Dr. Umar Johnson, we have to treat it critically. We have to think critically through these things, and we need to be people of reason. We need to be people of evidence. And I think that he just falls short on that so many times. And I think we'll get to see that here in a second. But I guess let me go ahead and bring this video up, and we'll get to chopping at it a little bit. See what he's talking about. I won't say chopping at. That sounds super aggressive. I'll just say critiquing.
Always been the few that saved the many.
Okay, I think I got the time sent you some ideas you guys wanted to key in on, so I'll just kind of assume that that's the we're on. Let me know when you want me to stop. If you want to start like mid clip, just let me know. But if not, I'll just keep it running like that. All right, here we go.
Is important because as African people, our heart and soul of existence is our connection with the Creator. At the same time, we have to recognize that organized religion has been a distraction and in many cases could be considered an outright enemy of African progress. More people have been murdered in this world over Islam and Christianity than any other reason. And because of that, when you look at the role that religion played in our enslavement, both Islam and Christianity were used as weapons of enslavement against African people. The Arabs were in the slave trade before the Caucasians were. And so when you look at the justification for slavery in both religions, whether or not it was intended by Jesus or Muhammad to put forth such a doctrine, at the end of the day, nonetheless, both religions co-signed our enslavement and participated in it. I don't have an issue with.
Can we
Christianity.
pause for a second?
Please, I was about to anyway. So hey.
Did you have something you wanted to get to before we paused it on that?
No, I'm well. So one of the things, I'll let you go first. I had a couple of things I want to say about that clip, but yeah, you go first, and then I'll follow up.
So, I mean, right then and there, I mean, what we have is an argument really from emotion, right? In a certain sense, this is really anti-critical thought emotion. So if Jesus, never mind Muhammad, because we got a lot of hadith that can deal with Muhammad and his views about black people and all that stuff. Big old debate regarding Muhammad and black folk or Africans. But like with Jesus, with the God of the Bible, right, which says that if you kidnap a man, you should be put to death. With the commands from Paul about liars, whoremongers, men stealers, having no inheritance, not inheriting the kingdom. Like Umar just dismisses that and says, well, it doesn't matter, it was still used. And what number one, right, is anti-critical thought. So we can't say that it was used because the people who were quote unquote practicing this religion, his own quote unquote ancestor, or who he claimed he a descendant of, Frederick Douglass.
Yeah, he switches it now. Like instead of using the word descendant, I think in this interview he said cousin, kinsman, like something along those lines, right?
Whatever, right? Whatever. You claim him, you should know what he said. And our ancestors were smart enough to know the difference between the real thing and a false thing. And you just dismiss that. Furthermore, like you have nothing to say about all of the Africans who were enslaving people. We just had a movie, The Woman King, right? I do believe that the homie Amazons and the kingdom that they represented were enslaving folks.
They was getting busy in that slave trade. Absolutely.
Sacrificing people to different gods, all kinds of stuff. This road, number one, when you can't be consistent, like nobody should listen to you. You can't be objective, and he can't be. Because to single out Christianity and not mention all of the other Africans who had religions who sacrificed people in the name of those religions, who enslaved people in the name of those religions, to not even mention that. I mean, you're just not being fair. You're not being a critical thinker. Nobody really should listen to you. But you're just grossly wrong, because guess what? Christianity was also the vehicle by which liberation came.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a vehicle. Abolitionism, right? The abolishment of slavery, right? I don't know. This is
rough, man.
Grossly rough.
I'm just this is the first of his many wildly speculative claims. I'm curious where he got his data from for this claim that Islam and Christianity have more deaths have been attributed to them than anything else. And I'm curious as that's one. Two, and this is just kind of saying what Matthew said more concise. There's a difference between there's a difference between attributing something and the abuse of something. And I think that what he's talking about is the abuse of Christianity. I can't speak for Islam, but it's most definitely the abuse of Christianity, because slavery and Christianity was a very distinctly different thing. It was outlawed. Man stealing was outlawed in Christianity. As a matter of fact, man stealing was outlawed in virtually every culture, not only in the Jewish community throughout the ancient Near East and the Second Temple, but virtually every community that Israel interacted with. Egypt, Babylon, we've got inscriptions in virtually every community that stealing a person, kidnapping a person, and selling them into slavery was against the law. So, again, wildly speculative claims that he makes that as the premise for his counter narrative.
Right. Well, I think part of the problem is I think he says things that are commonly said, and he says them with such vigor that people just kind of take it to be substantive. You know what I mean? Like the whole idea behind, Christianity and Islam account for more. I think he says murders or more people have been killed for those due to those worldviews than anything else. And especially he says the word murder. I mean, clearly that's not true. It's clearly it's evident that it's not true that Christianity and Islam account for more murders than anything else, according to the way that he worded it. And I'm not just making that up. I think it's a study by, I believe it's Barrow and Tipler, where they kind of catalog, how many murders can be accounted for due to like religious wars and things of that nature. And regardless of how you slice it, once you get to the 20th century and you account for regimes like Russia, you know what I'm saying, under Stalin, when you account for Germany under Hitler, when you account for China, Mussolini, and
Mao
Zedong. Or was it Mao Zedong? I think I'm saying that correctly. You know what I mean? Like once you account for these, atheistic leaning regimes, you know what I'm saying, if not outright atheists, you know what I'm saying, like more people have died in the 20th century than like every century before. Like that's not debatable. That's a fact. And then if I say died, I mean like at the hands of somebody for war and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? There we go. Boom. You see it right there. That you're holding up there. But what's the name of that book there? The most evil dictator in history. There you go.
Dictator. So it runs a list of dictators, and it tells you the carnage and collateral damage, that happened in light of them. And again, I haven't read this whole book. I've read some of this book, a couple. It's basically chapters where each person gets their own chapter. But the point being, it's to me, I'm thinking like, man, I can't. Like I'm trying to do the numbers, and I even Googled it while I was sitting here, and I'm like, the numbers are all over the place as to what you attribute to Christians. And I'm just like, how in the world does he have? Where does he get this data from? I'm curious.
Yeah, if you're talking about like wars and persecutions of various sorts, certainly the amount of people that were killed as a result of these governments and ideologies in the 20th century account for more than Islam or Christianity. That's just factually true. I'm saying, so he's just dead wrong about that. But aside from it, it's kind of like, to me, how like when like recently you had that there's a lot of controversy. There's a whole different discussion, but there's a lot of controversy about the Billboard top 50 rappers list. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people were upset about that, But like when you start talking about the GOAT, especially like hip hop, you always want to look at what categories are you going about? Like what's the criteria for being the GOAT? You know what I mean? And likewise, as he's making this claim against, that he believes to be, I guess, counts against Christianity, Islam, you got to look at the categories. I could say that, bad ideas account for more murders than Christianity and Islam. I could say that thinking, people thinking the wrong thing accounts for more murders than Christianity and Islam. Or I could say that socioeconomic interests, were interwoven many times with what was projected as holy wars, and therefore really it's economics, that should be attributed with more murders than Christianity. So like, depending on how you slice the data or the categories, you can come up with different conclusions. And so it's just a really fickle claim for him to make that ultimately is false anyway. But it's just, I think it just really illustrates, I don't want to use the word inability, but his struggle with making clear distinctions. You know what I'm saying? Like this is the same guy in the same clip, and I know we got a lot more to get to, but I'm just saying this is the kind of stuff that ticks me off. It's like when I'm listening to you, if you have a hard time making like important and clear distinctions, then it's a red flag for me that you're not a reliable source of information. So when you say that Christians or the church and Islam were enslaving people, rather than, like you said, MJ, like, or I can't remember which one you said it, but obviously these were abuses, you know what I'm saying? Like versus saying Christianity justified, enslavement. Christianity didn't justify anything. You know what I'm saying? People who proclaim to be Christians, distorted what the teachings of Jesus actually were, you know what I'm saying? And they were the ones that justified. It wasn't Christianity didn't justify anything. You know what I'm saying? So, I think that it's just, not being able to make the distinction between professing practitioners of a religion and the religion itself. When you can't make those kind of distinctions, then to me, you kind of, that's a red flag for me. That's a red flag for me. That tells me that you're probably not somebody that I should be listening to for to build my worldview around or inform me in terms of how I want to go about things. So, I mean, I'm gonna move on, because we got a lot more to get to, but I can't do it. I gotta add this one more point in. I'm sorry. I'm itching trying not to do this, but I got to, because this kind of stuff grates my nerves. So here's the thing, right? If you're gonna go by, like he himself has described himself as being like ethnicity first, like he's black first, right? So if you're gonna take a black first approach, okay, and you're gonna say, okay, that's the way you're gonna go about it.
I know where you're going.
Right, your ethnicity first. I'm gonna take it back to something you mentioned, MJ. The reality is, for the Dahomey, for the Fulani, for any of these groups that were African and yet sold other Africans into European slavery, they were ethnicity first too. They were ethnicity first. There wasn't some sort of universal African consciousness where we're all brothers and sisters on the African continent. That's a falsehood. That sort of unity doesn't come about in any semblance until you have like the African diaspora. You know what I'm saying? Like Africans didn't see themselves as all being brothers and sisters, kings and queens. That's not true. The fact of the matter is, you had different markings on the skin, or you served a different god, or you wasn't part of my clan and so forth. You were another people group. And so in order for them to preserve their own people group, they raided other African people groups, clans and tribes and so forth. And they weakened their male population. Then while they were selling them off to the Europeans in exchange for sugar, rum, guns, and so forth. Yeah. That's what happened. So they were ethnicity first. So if you're going to critique Christianity for having been leveraged against African people, then you have to then apply that same measure to your own worldview. If you're ethnicity first, then your own worldview has also been leveraged against African people. And so therefore you shouldn't rock with that either, I guess. It's the same critique. This is what I was saying before. When you don't think critically and you don't have a worldview that can really harness all the different aspects of all the different values that you want to, subscribe to, you start making claims that are incoherent, inconsistent with one another. Anyway, if y'all cool, we can go on to the next clip.
You don't think critically and you're just popping off at the mouth. This is the type of stuff that happens.
This is what happens. All right, here we go.
My mother's family is Christian. I don't have an issue with Islam. We were raised Muslim.
Yes.
That's where the name Umar comes from. Yes, sir. But at the same time, I see how religion has often served our oppressor much more than it has served us. I think religion is probably the greatest support base for white supremacy against African people than anything else. The fact that every religion basically, and there's few exceptions, there are exceptions, but there's few, every religion deifies oppression for Black people.
What do you mean by deifies?
By deify, when you go to church or you go to the masjid, you're taught that our predicament as African people is divinely ordained. Everything is under the prerogative of God. And if you are a slave or free, if you are an oppressor or oppressed, it's because God set it up that way. So when you go to church, you're told that if you pray enough, if you improve your faith enough, if you donate enough money, God will reverse this. In other words, the big issue I have with Black religion, it posits an external locus of control for Black people. And that's dangerous, because an external locus of control says that there's nothing I can do to transform this reality. Something outside of me has to come and liberate me. And the danger of that external locus of control that Islam and Christianity gives to Black people is that it parallels the same external locus of control that slavery gave us. In other words, during slavery, your freedom could only come if your master bequeathed it to you. Your freedom could only come if the government ended slavery with the 13th Amendment. Something outside of you, government, social activism, benevolent white people, had to make you free. And so in the church and in the masjid, the logic is the same, although it's not the government or the white man that has to free you, it's God Almighty who has to free you. And because of that, it takes the responsibility off of us to transform our reality, and we give it to the government or we give it to God.
Now, okay, so there's a lot to unpack. So, okay, so for starters, one, I love the fact that you did grow up with your mom being Christian and your father being Muslim. So you're speaking from a place of not necessarily being outside, right?
No, I was inside. I lived it.
Yeah, so like you understood and understand like the foundation of the religions.
Absolutely.
You've also gone into speaking on about just like what you refer to as toxic Christianity and toxic Islam, right? So what you're speaking on now, and this is my view of it, is the toxic version of both faiths. I think your viewpoint of the faiths practiced in their pure form isn't necessarily expressed with what you're explaining, right? Because what you're explaining now is basically saying, hey, it's up to God to change it. It's not up to us to change it.
Absolutely.
But that
in its pure form, I have no issue with Islam or Christianity, except what appears to be a justification for enslavement. That's the only doctrinal issue I have with both faiths. I don't think anyone should justify enslavement, definitely not a religion. But outside of that, purely in terms of what they believe and what they profess, it may not necessarily be for me, but I don't take issue with it. The enemy of African people is not the faith, but the way in which it is taught and the way in which it is weaponized against African independence.
right, and I would agree there, and I think that like
We said a lot there. I want to give y'all guys a chance to get in here.
You want me to go first, Chris, or you got something to say?
My comment is real quick. Okay, so he's talking about how liberation, like how you resolve this problem in Christianity and Islam, is through external sources. Is he not building a school to solve this purpose for others from the outside? Maybe it's just me. Seems a little, hypocritical. But go ahead. That's all I got to say about that.
Oh snap!
I would simply ask Umar Johnson, has he ever heard of Nat Turner? Has he ever heard of John Brown? White dude, right? Has he ever heard of Henry Highland Garnett? Has he ever heard of Francis Grimke? Look, Frederick Douglass, his quote unquote ancestor, kinsman, kinfolk, cousin, god brother, whatever, Umar, whatever, Dr. Johnson, excuse me, I give you your credentials. What he said is just so grossly false. I think the biggest weapon against white supremacy, systemic oppression, bigotry, the greatest weapon that I found is the gospel. It is simply the gospel. When you understand what the gospel is, right? and I'm not going to take a shot at any Christian determinist on your channel, Adam.
Okay.
But we do have Christian determinists in our camps.
Okay.
And y'all might want to think about that and work that out amongst yourself, because I don't think you have anything to say to Umar Johnson. So, but I'll leave that for another day.
Okay.
But
I hear you talking. All right.
But look, we don't hold to a hard determinism or a soft compatibilism or anything like that. Look, God offers grace to the humble, right? He commands Christians to look out for one another. He says to speak up for the voiceless. He is the liberator, right? Mm-hmm. God told the Israelites to remember that it was him who brought them out of Egypt, and to remember those, who to remember the foreigners even in their own land, because they were foreigners in Egypt. And things like that. Christianity commands us to do good work so that men may glorify our Father in heaven. Like, there is an element where we are to do things. Whatever you do, eat or drink, do it all as unto the glory. Do it all to the glory of the Lord. So what Umar is pushing is just it's just blatantly false. Like, even right now with the with I have my own critiques of American Anglo Christianity, right? It's a cultural form of I do think there are cultural forms of Christianity that Umar Johnson is railing against. I agree, and I think those forms of Christianity are syncretized with political philosophies, and it's wrong. It's completely wrong. The gospel of Jesus Christ, all of God's word, right? The whole witness of Scripture is against oppression. It's against white supremacy. It's against systemic racism. It's against injustice. In one of the I'm free. I can make a critique against what I perceive to be injustice, and also a critique even on my own culture, because guess what? The biblical worldview offers the power and the tools for moral transformation. I don't know what Umar can do about anything other than say that he doesn't like it.
Yeah, I think that's the issue, is that you start running into, like, when you really interrogate some of these kind of underlying ideas, you start to run into some roadblocks in Umar's thinking. You know what I mean? First of all, I will give Umar credit, in the sense that he's a very compelling speaker. You know what I'm saying? He articulates his points in a way that is a very attention grabbing. But Umar Johnson is not a theologian. It's pretty clear that he has a paper thin understanding of Christian theology. You know what I'm saying, and because he's trying to leverage, he's talking about Christianity. You know what I'm saying, like capital. You're talking about Christianity, and then he makes these blanket statements about, oh, when you go into the church, then you're going to be taught this. You know what I'm saying, and it's like, bro, like, first of all, you're already off on the wrong foot. You know what I'm saying, because the reality is, the way that he articulated what you're talking to church, I've never heard anybody say that. I've been in a lot of churches. I don't know what he's talking about. Is there some church somewhere that says that if you give enough money and enough, however you laid it out, then God's going to change the situation? Maybe somebody somewhere has said that. I've never heard that in church. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that the way that he just articulated the Christian position would be foreign to the vast majority of Christians, clergy or not, you know what I'm saying, out here today. And I think that one of the marks of not having engaged somebody else's position with integrity, and maybe I'll use a different word because I don't want to imply that he's being deceptive, but not having critically thought about somebody else's position is when you make generalizations and can't articulate what it is that they actually believe and teach. You know, if you can't do that, then that means you haven't really thought well enough about the position that you're trying to critique. The other issue is too, he in his short-armed attempt at doing theology and misunderstandings of Christian theology, it seems like, I think what he's trying to get at is this notion of like God's sovereignty and human agency, right? Human agency meaning, human beings' ability to be causal agents, to be able to bring about change, in the world, and so on and so forth. Now, biblically speaking, there are different perspectives on how God's sovereignty interacts with human agency. You know what I'm saying? Like, to what extent does God ordain things, and how does that interact with our free choices? Nevertheless, without getting into the weeds of that debate, one thing that we can say is that there's no reason to think that you can't be faithful to Scripture and teach, a perspective that conveys both that God is sovereign and we have real responsibility and real human agency, right? Because to your point, MJ, when God talks about, I brought you out of Egypt, I brought you, into the promised land, and I did this and I did that. Well, if you just read the Exodus story, clearly you see the hand of God moving, but you also see that they fought some wars in there. They had to go to battle with some folk. You know what I mean? There was a guy named Moses who did a lot of stuff along the way, you know what I'm saying, in obedience to God, but he was definitely taking action, saying, in accordance with what God is trying to do to bring about a particular outcome. So even though God is saying, yes, God is sovereign, and we see his sovereignty playing out, for example, in the Exodus account, there's also very real place for human agency and human action. So I said that to say it's not true. It's not a part of Christian teaching that we basically sit on the sideline and just wait around until whatever God's ordained just kind of happens, and we're just passively going along down the stream of human history. That's not biblical. That's totally unbiblical. There's nobody can teach that faithfully to Scripture. The reality is, we do have responsibility. We are expected to take action in the face of injustice. That's why somebody like a Henry Howland Garnett could draw from his Christian convictions to stand against the oppression of that time. That's why, Frederick Douglass, his the person he claims to be a relative of. I'm saying, like, that's why he could, make these kind of claims, hold to Christian convictions, and yet nevertheless take action. Sojourner Truth, so many other people I can name, because it's just it's flat out false that it's a part of the Christian tradition and Christian teaching that somehow we're just docile in the face of whatever's going on around us. We just kind of lay around until God does something. That's not true. That's not what Scripture teaches. And he made a glaring caricature and generalization of what the church actually teaches. Yeah, you go ahead, Chris.
Marcus Garvey, Harriet Tubman, virtually every person that he mentioned that he idolizes is a Christian, and the acts that they performed were in light of their Christian convictions. He wants to name his schools after these people, yet here he is critiquing the very institution that fueled these people's actions that resonates with him so much. It's so ironic.
Yeah, it's why it's again, he just kind of he's sawing off that tree branch. You know what I'm saying? Like, but this notion that there's somehow a necessary conflict between external control and human agency or human responsibility, that's just flat out false. There's no reason to think that those things are necessarily contradictory. Another piece is too, the idea of there being some sort of external control is not something that's specific to the Christian worldview, to be honest. I mean, there are African traditions that suggest that there's some sort of high God, or there's some sort, and there may be some intermediary deities and ancestors who have some sort of effect in the world and things like that. They have the ability to bring about change and order things and so forth. Like, it's not, if you're going to make that criticism of Christianity, then you need to criticize the vast majority of African versions of African spirituality as well, including, your own Yoruba tradition, because the Yoruba tradition would say that there are spiritual entities out there that have the ability to do things, even actualize stuff in the real world. They can exercise some sort of control. They can have a control that's external to you and external to people. So if you're going to make that allegation, or excuse me, that you're going to make that critique of Christianity, then make that of your own worldview as well. So, anyway, we keep moving. So I think I got in my notes here, you guys wanted to, was it the 31 minute mark? Is that right? I can't remember which one of y'all said. Okay, I'll jump to the 31 minute mark. Okay. Let's see here. All right, here we go.
Based on religious affiliation. Religious schools are the most powerful.
I did not know that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so the issue I have is, so what? They don't believe in your religion as long as they respect it. Let them come and get that education. Imagine if we was on a plantation and Queen Mother Harriet Tubman showed up and said, wait, if you're not Christian, you ain't coming on my Underground Railroad. There was Muslims who was enslaved. You understand? There was African traditionalists who was enslaved. Harriet Tubman didn't say that. She fought for black people. We cannot let the religion supersede the racial agenda, which I think is one of our weaknesses as a people. We're the only people who put religion in front of the race. God made you black. You chose Christianity. God chose you to be an African. The only thing you belong to that you cannot choose. There's Christians who stop being Christian every day. There's Muslims who stop being Muslim every day. There's Jehovah's Witnesses who stop being Jehovah's Witnesses every day. There's Methodists and Episcopalians who stop being Methodists and Episcopalian every day. But guess what you can never change?
Being black.
Being black. And who made you black? God. So what is more divine? The religion or the race? It's the race. I'm older than Jesus. I'm older than Muhammad. I'm older than Abraham. I'm older than Noah. When I existed, they wasn't even born. I'm older than every person you can name in either one of them books. So why would you dare limit me to that? I respect them all. But don't you dare tell me that my spirituality begins with that. My people were worshiping God before Jesus' grandmother was born. How dare you limit me to a religion? I respect your right to do that. The point that I'm getting at, why are religions so chauvinistic and dictatorial with how people establish their relationship with supreme consciousness? You understand me? Give people the right to build their relationship with God. And my issue with religion is sometimes it can become so constraining that it suffocates the spiritual life out of the person seeking the salvation.
Man.
All right.
Woo.
I think he was coming for you on that one, Chris. He had a lot to say, brother. He was coming for you, dog. What's up?
I'm first of all, I'm confused, and maybe I'm just slow. I don't understand what he meant when he said he's older than Moses and older than Noah. What was the point he was trying to make at that point? Because I'm like you weren't older than you aren't currently older than any of those people were. So what exactly were you
he's saying he was as in black people. He's he was kind of like generalizing
the corporate eye, the black race. We've been around longer than those folks. And so he's saying I in that sense. And I'm like, we'll go ahead. Okay, no, because anyway. Woo! He said a lot. So he said that people change their religion all the time, but you can't change your color. And he basically was deifying color but race, while at the same time referring to this color being something that was given to them by God. Again, I'm confused. What exactly are you saying? You're saying that the people who worship the people of color who are worshiping God are worshiping a God who made them their color, but didn't give them the actual religion. Is that what you're saying? I just found a lot of the things that he was saying as very confusing and contradictory, and I would have loved a more articulate explanation of what he was getting at. And thank you for explaining the corporate eye, because it made sense once you said it. But prior to that, I'm just thinking like, and even that still doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because it's like, well, still these black people are still the people who are telling me something, and you're telling me something different. Why should I listen to you instead of Noah? Why should I listen to you instead of Moses? Why should again, just a lot of a very convoluted thinking and communication that really confused me more than anything.
Well, I mean, see, I think that's the thing, man. And I'm not a preacher basher. You know what I'm saying? Far be it from me to, I'm not a pastor basher or anything like that. And I love the rhetorical skill that you often find in African American circles. I mean, but this really reminds me of how, like, I mean, let's keep it real, especially down in the South. You know what I'm saying? You have brothers who can hoop their tail off. You know what I'm saying? It gets to that point in the service where it's time to start hooping. You know what I mean? And they can, really they can pull those chords. Somebody get to playing on the organ, and next thing you know, you can be caught up in the moment of somebody, in that mode. And then when you think about what they're talking about later, they won't say nothing. You know what I'm saying? I've been in several services where somebody hooped a real good message, and then you ask somebody, like, yeah, what was he talking about? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's kind of what it is with Umar. Is like, I feel the passion. I can appreciate it. I get it. You know what I'm saying? And I understand why people are often moved, you know what I'm saying, when he speaks. But the thing is, when you then go through what he actually said, with the fine-tooth comb of logic and reason, you find he not saying nothing. that's really what it comes down to. You know what I mean? And with this issue specifically, first of all, this idea, I was older than Abraham and Jesus and blah 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 blah. Again, this man is not a theologian, bro. Like he continues to show his colors that he just really doesn't understand very much about theology. You know what I'm saying? When it comes to the Christian worldview, the Christian claim is that God has always existed. Obviously, you know what I'm saying. People are finite. You know what I'm saying, and one way or the other through salvific history, you know what I'm saying, through God's plan of salvific history, whether you believe there was an old earth or a young earth, one way or another, God chose to reveal Himself. You know what I'm saying, by leaving, stepping out of eternity past into time. You know what I'm saying, i.e., through Jesus. You know what I'm saying, like the emergence, because I was here before Jesus' grandmother. Okay, but we would hold that Jesus is the second member of the Trinity. You know what I mean? And so, in so much as Jesus Himself is eternal, His life on earth was not His beginning. You know what I'm saying? That's just so. For me, when He makes claims like that, like that's just bouncing off, because it's like you clearly don't understand what it is that Christians actually believe. I do not believe that Jesus' beginning was somewhere right around that first century. You know what I'm saying? I don't believe that. I don't believe that's when Jesus began. I believe that the beginning of His earthly ministry, or His earthly, earthly existence, if you will, as a physical human being, I believe that's when He decided to step into time, you know what I'm saying, and live that out. But I believe that Jesus always existed. So no, you don't predate Jesus. Like, you just because, even if you want to make the claim that your people, you know what I'm saying, predate, the Jesus' physical walk on earth, you don't predate Jesus, bro. But I think even more problematic, which I think for me, and I would be interested to hear you guys' take on it. But this idea of putting race first over, quote unquote religion, I think it really betrays a fundamental misunderstanding on Umar's part about where these two categories even sit. First of all, it's not true. It's not accurate to say that God, he gave you your race. Now you can say that He made you in the color that He made you, then he put you in the context, in the sovereignty, He put you in the context of where you are, and so on and so forth, so that culturally you became a part of whatever race you're a part of. But really, if you look at the genetic code, race is not a thing. You know what I'm saying, like, race is not a genetic reality, right? I'm saying there's you can't look at somebody's genetic code and read through it, like, oh, and at this point you get to, okay, this person's a black person and ought to be have experience in society in this particular way. This person's a white person and they fit into society this way. This person's Asian. That's not a part of the genetic code.
What about phrenology?
I mean, we got.
I'm just kidding. That's a joke. That's a joke.
But I'm just saying, like, so this idea that God made you whatever race you are. No, race is very much so a social construct in many ways. You know what I'm saying that it's layered on top of certain physical realities. But in the same way that if I go to Mexico right now and say, let's say if I cross that border between the United States and Mexico, like, you're not going to see some sort of natural phenomenon in the dirt where it says you have entered Mexico. Like that wasn't like etched into Mexico's border. That's a human invention. I mean, those kinds of boundaries. Money, that's a human invention. Like, all these things are human. That doesn't mean they're not significant. That doesn't mean they're not important. It just means that you can't jump from that to say, okay, well, all these things are God given. You know what I mean? And so I think that he just doesn't think well. And that being said, I'm just going to throw this out there. Let's say if Umar Johnson is right, let's say that the only thing that you can choose not to be a Christian, you can choose to not be whatever you want to be, but the only thing you can't do is choose not to be the race that God gave you. If that's true, then that means that with respect to your race and how God organized you in society, God exercised external control. He exercised control that's external to you in terms of who you would be in the world, right? You didn't decide whether you would be black, white, or whatever. God exercised external control. You don't have any responsibility on that. You don't have any ability to change it. So if you're anti-external control, then it seems to me that you should take issue with God, who created you with the racial specificities that you currently have, and thus put you in a predicament that you're in.
He's arbitrary.
It's arbitrary. Which one? You're either a pro external control or you're against it. Which one you want to be? You know what I'm saying? But you can't do both. You know, I want to say a little bit more about I think where some missteps in terms of that piece. But I know I've been talking a lot, so I'm gonna let you say something, MJ, and see what you got there, bro.
Yeah, the way that he uses black is a complete anachronism, right?
Right.
You said it once, Adam. You said it in your written material on some of your blogs. I mean, you wrote about ethnic epistemology, things like that. Nobody thought, before the slave trade, right? Nobody thought of themselves as black, right? And another thing,
and that term universal use of it, yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
Nobody that is Umar Johnson can thank the white man for that, right?
Right.
He can thank the white God who he, by his logic, God made us black. By his own logic, he could thank his God for making him black, which came through slavery. That external force. Now, as a Christian, I believe in redeeming things. I don't have a problem with blackness, but I'm not going to use it in the anachronistic fashion. I'm gonna take blackness, I'm gonna make it what I want to make it, and I'm gonna, that thing is gonna be funky, and I like it like that. Right. But what Umar is pushing is just anachronistic. It's race before religion, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, what about ethics? Don't ethics come as well? I mean, ethics would tie into religion, right? How you treat your neighbor, how you treat God, right? How you respond, quote unquote, to the divine. Mm-hmm. That would be prior to, quote unquote, race, because I would not know how to treat the race properly. So the Umar is just all over the place. But
right.
What's really disturbing with Umar is, number one, his racial essentialism, right? Number two, I mean, he just like you said, Adam, Jesus Christ, and we can debate this. I would love to. He has entered into time and space. Mm-hmm. He said, before Abraham was, I am.
That's right? What he said.
That's what he said. Now, if you want to get into that and debate that it's your funeral. Good luck. But God has spoken. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the restrictions, you ethically speaking, you just can't do what you want to do. Typically, I'm down for the black struggle, but when you tell me that look, leave your religion at home, it's because of my religion that I'm speaking up for the oppressed.
That's right.
It's because of my religion that I love black people. It's because of my religion that I look out for the poor, the widow, and the fatherless, because Jesus has put that on my heart.
Right.
I could be out there exploiting black people, like some people, I'm not gonna say names, right. Exploiting, taking up, I'm gonna leave it alone. Uh-oh. But it's because of Jesus changing my heart that I do certain things. And so to separate, you can't separate your love for God from your love for your neighbor. You just can't, right? The social and the spiritual in Christianity are always connected. Right. Always connected. So once again, Umar Johnson is just not a theologian. I would love for Umar to just, maybe get with a few people who's kind of been calling his name and just learn a little bit, humble yourself a little bit, learn what Christianity is, and not the white man's religion that you're railing against.
Right. Chris, you want to say something?
Yeah, because again, excuse me. So he believes that, because later on in the video, and I don't think we're going to get to it today, or we may, but later on he says, "Oh, black people were on Earth 100 million years before white people came along." Point one. Point two. All the other people groups, Mexicans, everybody else came from black people. Okay, so wait a minute. If we all come from the common ancestors, then how are you making an ontological distinction between the two? Like,
come on, bro.
What is the logic of this? Where does this come from? Secondly, and when it comes to us Christians, Like, you're telling us that Christianity is okay, you got no beef with it in its authentic form, but its authentic form tells us about back in the beginning and everything from there, which you think is all African people, by the way. And then here you are contradicting what they're saying. Again, it doesn't make any sense. And then you're offering us this ad hoc, where is this coming from, where color is everything. And he's very clear at various points in the video where he makes this very sharp distinction: black, purple, and brown, black, purple, and brown, black, purple, and brown. So it's like on the color spectrum, apparently, even in the people of color,
might not make it.
People.
There's a caste system. There's a caste system of who is the more melanin means that you're more empowered or you're more spiritually gifted, or I mean this. Listen,
but what's so funny about that, Chris? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but what's so funny? That sounds like a slave master to me. You know what I'm saying? Like,
exactly.
Promoting colorism in the African American community. That sounds like what the slave master was doing to me.
This is the
opposite
exact same This is the exact same foundation that you are critical of the injustice that our ancestors and we today experience, and the injustice that we today still experience. You're critiquing that, and that's the problem, right? You're saying the injustice is the problem, but your solution is to basically do the same thing to them, or is based on the same premise that they had. Let me offer you some advice from the great American songwriter and poet, Mr. Stevie Wonder. When you believe in things that you don't understand, then you suffer. Superstition ain't the way.
Oh my God,
dude.
Okay, that's good. Oh man, I can't even follow that, man. I might have to go to the next clip. That's sound advice from the brother Stevie Wonder, man. I believe that song was in the kid life.
A blind man can see it.
Right. Oh snap.
Motown apologetics.
Hey, man, there you go. Man, I'm gonna take it a step further, man, because here's what's funny, right? This cat said, Umar Johnson said that on the one hand, he's takes issue with Christianity and Islam. And I mean, I'll leave Muslims to defend themselves, but he takes issue with Christianity on the basis of the fact that Christianity was leveraged against African people, right? That's point one. Point two, in this last clip that we saw, he also said that he believes that people should they should adopt a race first perspective over and above the religion. Race first rather than religion. Well, guess what? You know who took a race first perspective over and above what Christianity taught? The white racist slave owners that you're so upset about. So you actually have the same moral convictions as the white racist slave masters who put race over and above the moral convictions that really flow from Christianity. I'm saying, because if you look at from Genesis to Revelation, and you're being honest, approaching the scripture with integrity, you're not going to arrive at the conclusion that that Western slavery was okay, whether it be based on man stealing. You're talking about partiality on the basis of race going on. You're talking about greed that was in the mix. All these things were pillars of the transatlantic slave trade, all of which are condemned in scripture as sinful. There's no way that you can look at the Western slave trade and come away thinking that, oh yeah, Christianity is cool with it. Absolutely not. And so therefore you have these white slave owners and marketers and whoever else putting the race first. But that's what you want to do though, Umar. You race first too. You know what I'm saying? Like I said earlier, even about the Africans, they put ethnicity first. They didn't care. It wasn't this la-di-da, we all Africans and we love each other because we all Africans, kings and queens. No. If you wasn't part of my tribe, if you wasn't part of my clan, I'm sorry, buddy. I'm gonna get this rum and this sugar for you, dog. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm about to get these guns from these white people at your expense. I'm gonna take my tribe. I'm gonna invade yours because you're not part of my tribe. I'm gonna kill anybody who doesn't make it from the interior to the coast. I'm just gonna kill you off, and I'm gonna sell whoever makes it to these white people. That's what I'm gonna do if I was an African. And Umar, because it's ethnicity first, my people first. That's what kind of time you want, Umar. If you're gonna be consistent, but he's not consistent. I'm saying last thing I'm gonna say is, like, I think he approaches this kind of like religion and spirituality with like kind of a relativist perspective. Like, oh, these people are cool. It might not be good for me, But it's all good. Listen, man, like this is a real, again, he's not a theologian. This is a real underappreciation of the real distinction between Muslims, Christians, African spiritualists, or whatever. All of these different worldviews are making claims about reality as it is. They're trying to say that this is the way the reality is. And they have deeply divergent conclusions about how reality is. So they're not all worldviews are created the same. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying that Jesus, died on the cross for my sins and your sins and everybody's sins and rose from the grave, as kind of like a feel-good kind of thing. Now, I'm saying it's a matter of history. You know what I'm saying? As in the same way that I'm black talking to you right now through this video, I'm saying that Jesus rose from the grave, right? I'm making a reality claim. So it's not, you can't just look at these different religions as like social clubs that you can kind of hop in and hop out of. And at the end of the day, because they're that flimsy anyway, you might as well put the race first. No, we're making real claims about reality. And the fact of the matter is, without these claims, like MJ said, without this framework, this Christian framework, I don't think that you or anybody else has the resources within your worldview to even stand on the convictions that you have. Maybe we'll come back to that. So I know we got a couple more clips I can talk, but I think we can get to these last two.
He knows what you just said and agrees with it, because when he was talking about the color of Jesus and the other guy said the color of Jesus don't matter, he was like, truth don't matter.
Oh, good point. Yeah, he did say that. So if truth matters enough for him to get as amped up as he did, I don't know if we'll cover that clip or not, but if truth matters enough for him to get as amped up as he did in that clip, then it still matters when it comes to addressing, these different worldviews and which one you should be subscribed to. You can't just subscribe to it just because they black first or whatever. I'm not going to subscribe to something that's on the surface resonates with me, but then when you dig deeper, is based in untruth and deception. Like that makes no sense. You know what I'm saying? All right. Anyway, let's go ahead. I think we're gonna have to 49-minute mark. We'll go there.
So you
again, the issue ain't
you, and I think like you have a heavy
schools in America. He was leaving to
against.
Started going.
I do think the art matters, right? Because
the truth matters.
Well, but will we ever really get down to it though? Because
absolutely. We know what Jesus looked like. Every statue, every coin, every painting of Jesus the Christ was blue, black, purple until the rise of racism and the Europeans started going around the world systematically stealing all of the original statues and images of Christ and replacing them with Caucasians. Leonardo da Vinci painted the Last Supper in 1482. Was that a coincidence? Because Columbus set sail when? In 1492. And what was the greatest weapon used in order to enslave African people? It was the white Jesus. The white Jesus was Columbus' greatest weapon, and it's still the greatest weapon. I knew a brother in Jamaica. I met him in Florida. I was speaking at the Marcus Garvey Technical School of Jamaica's fundraiser. He said, Dr. Umar, we got a white church. We have a black church with a white Jesus in Jamaica. This is one of the blackest islands. This is the land of the Honorable Marcus Garvey, greatest Pan-Africanist of all time. He said he went out and got a black Jesus painted, much better than the cracker Christ. His pastor told him, we will never take this down. This is how Jesus looked. Blue, black, purple people content on having Leonardo da Vinci's uncle masquerading as their savior. If your deity looks like your enemy, if you are content to let your deity look like your enemy, you deserve to be a slave. You deserve to be a slave. Look, Jesus was from the tribe of Judah.
Right.
Judah was the bluest, blackest of the 12. They were known for their nappy hair and purple skin. His mother hid him in Kemet, Egypt. Named Egypt by the Greeks. It means land of the blacks. There's no way you're going to hide a white, blonde hair, blue-eyed child in a country of blue, black, purple African people. Let's keep on going. The title Christ, which comes from an African word, karas, which speaks to the spirit that rises within. In ancient Africa, no one would have been given the title Christ if your skin was not kissed of the sun. In those days, I would be too light to be a savior because back then, divinity was black. Asaru, one of the manifestations of God consciousness, was called Lord of the perfect black. Blackness was divinity. That's why every religious teacher was black and nappy. Nobody looked like white with blonde hair and blue eyes. That's a recent creation of the pale man. The question is, why are black churches so content with having a false image of Jesus that they know is false in their church instead of a real historical depiction? And by the way, the oldest original painting of Christ right now, I believe it's in the museum in Egypt. It's the oldest one. And guess what? Everybody blue, black, purple. And I believe it was drawn from life. Everybody was blue, black, purple, including Jesus. Undeniably black. Undeniably black, blue, black, purple. And when you go to the Falashas, the original Hebrews of Ethiopia, they still look the same way. Blue, black, purple with the nappy hair. Some of them was taken to Israel and they're fighting against war crimes, or should I say crimes against humanity, because the racist white European Jewish Israeli government is oppressing them. So we know what Jesus looked like. Why the church okay? Why is the black church okay not seeing their Lord and Savior represented as he was?
You know, and it's interesting, right? Like I hear everything that you're saying. And to be honest, like,
Do y'all want to happen there, or should I play a little bit more?
That's fine, man. He said a mouthful right there.
Okay, cool, yeah. Who's on first? I don't know who want to go first.
Matthew, you go first.
Yeah, what you got, MJ? Oh, I can't hear you. I think you muted. He can't even get the mic on. He's so worked up. He can't.
Umar. Number one, Christ comes from Mashiach. The Hebrew word means Messiah, right? These etymological arguments are played out at this point. It's played out. You had other messiahs. I think the Persian king, correct me if I'm wrong, was it I don't know if it was Darius, but he was called the Messiah. Was it who was the Persian king? Okay, he was called, if you translate it in Greek, it would be Christ. Was he blue, black? Blue, purple, black? It's really a dumb argument. But
see, that's that conscious community stuff though coming out. Like that,
yeah,
like
man.
I feel like normally I don't feel like he talks this long, but like I guess for whatever reason, like when you have these long interviews, you start seeing the pseudo conscious community stuff bleeding out. Because like you said with the whole caress thing, that's definitely some Anthony Browder pseudo scholarship stuff.
Dude,
there's nobody of legitimate scholarship that would trace Christ to caress, you know what I'm saying, in Kemet. You know what I'm saying? There's no responsible historian I don't think would do that. But then anyway, go ahead.
I feel like when he felt like he wasn't going to get a lot of resistance from the host, he starts talking out the stinker. Like, but this is like at some point he got in his bag and just started just going
pseudoing it up. I know Alfredo somewhere laughing when Alfredo sees this boy. He was starting to get in his pseudo bag. It's like a big competition in the conscious community about who can be the most pseudo right now.
Oh, man, that's facts.
He started pulling out all the pseudo arguments. He had to be black if he was in Egypt. Like, why did Jesus go to Egypt? Why did his folks go to Egypt? Obviously, Herod wouldn't have had any jurisdiction in Egypt.
Thank you.
Doesn't black Alexander's library, right? I mean, like, come on, man. What don't these people believe that the Greeks did their thing in Egypt at this point? I mean, that is another argument that they make, that the Greeks went and raided the library in Alexander. Like, at this point, you had an empire, man. Like,
yeah, it was a metropolis. Like I think Alexandria would be something akin to like New York or something like that. You know what I mean? There was all different kinds of people. I mean, you would have some people who would be just really all everybody. You know what I'm saying, from Rome. You have some of everything in Alexandria. You know what I'm saying? That's not a big deal. You know,
it's also like a college town. It's also like Harvard. It's like it's a higher education mecca of sorts. And so you got a lot of you get world renowned writings in this world renowned library in Alexandria.
Right.
So
Right.
like while like the connotations of it, I think, are similar to like a higher learning, a center where people are going to because they recognize you can interact with other intellects there.
Right.
And I'm not trying to go take us down a rabbit hole, but I'm saying the argument that Jesus went to Egypt because he was black, that is dumb. That is pseudo. Sound good, makes black people feel good. He's trying to do therapy at this point. That's what pseudo scholars do. They do pseudo therapy. They do therapy is crazy. But
Right.
Jesus went there to escape the jurisdiction of King Herod.
Exactly.
You can do that in the empire. Empire is comprised of countries with kings and governors and things like that. And Jesus simply went to a different region of the empire who they spoke Greek. The lingua franca in the empire was Koine Greek. Are these black Africans speaking Greek? Well, they probably are, but I mean, that kind of cuts against the argument a little bit. But
right,
it's just a bad argument, and this brother's losing credibility by the second.
I mean, but see, to your point though, and I'm glad you said that, because that's a common idea. That's what I was saying before this. I think sometimes, Dr. Umar will make claims that people commonly hear, and he says it with fervor, so people just kind of give him the benefit of the doubt, or they'll say, oh, he must be on point. But to your point though, what he's saying really does betray a lack of understanding of history, particularly there in the first century Rome. You're right. In the jurisdiction where Herod has some sway and could bring about things, he could off somebody, he could kill somebody, he could do a census, he can do whatever he wanted to do. He didn't have that same authority in Egypt. So it's not like Jesus and the family, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph are hiding, in Egypt. Meaning once they got there, they're like ducking and dodging, trying to blend in. No, that's not what it was. Is that they went to a place that wasn't under the jurisdiction of Herod. It's really that simple.
And
so there's no color inference that you can make from that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It wasn't a matter of blending in.
I was just gonna say, you also had a Jewish community in Egypt. Like, I mean, they had been there since Jeremiah.
Had been there.
So, I mean, they had a temple as well. Now, I mean, Mr. Umar, Dr. Umar, please stop.
Yeah, you got to stop, man. You got to stop.
I got a certain amount of sympathy for the psychology related, like when he's referring to him going to Jamaica and this church with the white Jesus and the pastors or leadership saying like, that's Jesus right there. And I do think that there's a sense in which I do think there's a reality in which there is harm done there. It's problematic. The problem is, I think he overstates he overstates how much damage is actually done. The reality is, social color is a social construct. Color as ontologically relevant is a social construct. We recognize that. We know that. So at the worst case scenario is they're mistaken when he gets into his little narrative that black people who envision their enemy. Again, your ancestor, he says enemy. I'm going to say ancestor because by his own explanation of how things transpire, they're your ancestors too.
Apparently we're all in the same family tree, right?
Apparently we all in the same family tree. Guess what? The Bible says something like that. Anyway, well, depending on what tradition you come from these days.
Uh-oh.
I'm not talking about me, just by the way. I'm talking about Dr. Swamidash and the historical Adam and all that stuff. All that stuff going on over there. Like there's debates going on about that.
Yeah.
That's neither here nor there.
Switch for my blood. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And I'm just not interested.
But
anyway,
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but just the fact that he's making this color color thing and this enemy. He's got this whole little narrative spun about, hey, there's something inherently wrong with you when you pick the person that's your enemy to be your savior. And that if you don't get the right color of the savior, then it makes this huge impact, or it's hugely problematic until the outcome of what the people is going to experience. And to me, it's just like, this is just sad and pathetic. And again, him overstating overstating the case, and then once again sawing off the branch that he's sitting on, because it doesn't even make sense. It's convoluted.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And here's the thing: is like, just for clarity's sake, I don't know who's going to watch this video, but none of us here, I know myself, and I can speak confidently for apologists in Detroit and MJ Jackson. We don't believe that Jesus was white. You know what I'm saying? Like none of us believe that Jesus was like some, skinny, lily white, dude who looked like he could barely, change a tire. Like nobody here believes that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, shoot, honestly, like when I was coming up, I came up in the AME Zion Church, and the first person I heard speak on not only, Jesus, but, several other folks, who we can clearly say, were black. I mean, Jesus, we can talk about what shade he was or whatever. Clearly he was a melanated man, but the first person I heard talk about melanated folks in the Bible was my pastor in like 8th grade. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's where I got it from. I never had a white Jesus sitting around in my house. That's not my experience. So when he makes these generalizations, be like, oh, well, the church teaches this, or the black Christians believe that, like he's making these sweeping generalizations that clearly don't apply to all black people. And then they'll be like, oh, well, maybe there's some exceptions. Like, all right, but dog, you keep granting 50,000 exceptions. After a while, you just have to drop the generalization, my brother. You know what I'm saying? After a while, you gotta let it go. But anyway, I don't want to get to like one more clip here, and then we'll go ahead and finish it out and see where we end up. So I think we're at the 58-minute mark, right? There we go. Oh, by the way, to your point, Chris, you said that Dr. Umar Johnson says that, whether it be Mexicans, white people, whomever, they all came from us, from black people. So you're right. There's one family tree. Now this gets back to MJ's point, right? There's going to be in any worldview, you've got to account for ethics, i.e. morality, and you have to account for anthropology. What's the proper way to understand mankind, right? So when it comes to anthropology, if this anthropology is, that we're all from the same family tree and they come from somewhere later on down the line, then where does he get this moral claim, like this should, if you will, that we should be race first? Why not? Like why not just say be humanity first, right? Like why be arbitrary and just say, okay, you could either say humanity first, or you could go his route and say, well, all right, we're going to do race first. Like what is it that what justification does he have for holding a race first perspective, given the fact that he believes that we all come from humanity? And if he is against external control, somebody else could just as easily say humanity first, and he can't say that they're wrong, because he believes we shouldn't have any external control. He doesn't believe that should guide us in how we navigate these things. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Before you go, 58 is just him talking about referencing the book of Revelation's description of Jesus. We could probably skip that one. There's a couple other time marks that I didn't put in there, and I can run down some of that. So at the 1 minute mark, he starts talking about going into his conscious community bag and giving you giving you some descriptions of his own religious world view. So you could kind of look at
the 1 minute mark.
Yeah, 1 minute to 105. He gets he just starts running on with his conscious community.
A minute or an hour? Like which one? An hour?
I mean 1 hour. Yeah, 1 hour. Sorry, not 1 minute. It's 1 hour. I got 59 down here, but
okay, cool.
I didn't put the colon. So yeah, it's the 1 hour mark, and he goes on to about 105 and kind of just runs down a bunch of other stuff. And then another interesting timestamp is 119 when he's talking about Jesus as a pacifist. Jesus wasn't a pacifist, but anyway, I like the conscious community one. Let's go with that one. And if we have time, we can look at that. Yeah, 1 hour. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's my dyslexic mind that keeps saying
Man in
1 minute to 1 hour.
That's all good. I got you. I'm with you.
This is power.
Wow. And to be honest, like that perspective on being black, I think is one that, especially with our community having self-hate, one that can definitely bring our perspective up as a group. And I do think that it's important. But I also think, and I didn't want to take the conversation here, but I just want to say this real quick. I do think it might be there's potential for danger there a little bit, right?
Go ahead.
Because let's think about this, right? So like if we don't like the fact that white people have like said they're the superior race for years and years. And then
I did not argue racial superiority.
oh,
Go ahead.
okay.
I did not argue.
So,
I have no need for a white girl to think she's less than my daughter.
okay.
I have no need for an Arab child to see me as superior. As African people, our culture does not preach superiority. I do not believe in racial superiority. Do you understand? But I do believe in the truth. And I do know that God chose my people through which to send every savior he's ever sent to this planet. You can't name one who didn't look like me. Buddha was an African. Krishna was an African. There's no savior that walked this earth in ancient times who wasn't kissed of the sun.
Right.
The world needs to know that truth.
So then here's the thing, right? So let's get to it, right? So knowing that truth, right, is something that's not the easiest thing to do, right? Like most people, like, are very kind of like, there's so much information, right? If I go online, like, just like how you're passionate about Jesus being black, there's someone else who's like, no, Dr. Umar's wrong. Jesus was white.
And what evidence they got that Jesus was white?
So I guess what I'm trying to get to is, how would you recommend for somebody to pursue the truth of their spirituality in today's day so that it sticks? Because I don't want this conversation to be one of entertainment that doesn't actually change people's perspective in a positive way. You know what I mean? Because you see what I'm saying? Because look, if Jesus was black and that's the truth, I want us to know that. But it's hard to know. You see what I'm saying? Like everybody's saying, like, everybody's just as passionate. There's somebody in every group that's just as passionate.
Understood. Passion is one thing. Truth is something else.
Right.
The difference between our passion and everybody else's is ours is backed up on truth. Do you realize that the black man and woman was on this planet all by ourselves for over 100,000 years before anybody else evolved from our seed? We was on the earth. The earth was ours. We gave birth to the white man, the Arab, the Latino, the East Indian, the Chinese. We gave birth to them. This was our planet. And I totally believe this. Until the black man and black woman rediscover their true divinity and purpose, not superficial, not just calling myself a Christian, but embodying it in its truest essence, not just calling myself a Muslim, but embodying it in its truest essence, not just calling myself an African traditional spiritualist, but embodying it, this planet will never go back to being what God intended it to be. Because I absolutely believe in my heart, we are the only people who can rule this planet with justice. How do I know this? Because we did it already. When ancient Kemet ruled this earth, when the Nile Valley cultures of East Africa ruled this earth, we did it with justice. The Greeks and the Romans came to Africa begging to learn, begging to study, begging to sit at the feet of our kings and queens and scholars and priests. You understand? We ran the world with justice. White man can't run the world with justice. He runs it with brutality. The Chinese ain't gonna be able to run the world with justice. He's gonna run the world with brutality. The Arab can't run the world with justice. He's gonna run the world with brutality. The only people who can rule this planet in righteousness is the black man and black woman. The point that I'm making, if the black church is too insecure, too afraid, or too unconcerned about marrying divinity to blackness, then the black church is useless. Because if you want to kick off the slave energy that every black boy and girl in America has, if you want to rip out that servitude that is so deeply planted and ingrained in the unconscious of black people, you have to marry blackness to divinity. You got to teach those boys you are God. Not the supreme consciousness, but a manifestation of it. You got to tell those black girls you are God, not the supreme essence, but a manifestation of it. Why do you think black women wear so much fake hair? Why do you think we spend more money on hair and beauty than all other people put together? The first woman ever created on earth is imitating the youngest woman ever created on earth. And you're spending $30 billion and catching cancer and fibroid tumors just to look like a European. You know why? Because the black church separated blackness from divinity. Blackness is divinity. And until the black church marries blackness back to divinity, we'll never go back to being the gods and goddesses we were intended to be.
Man.
Color matters in the church. Jesus's color matters. And until you take this and put it back in that book will be worthless, because every black boy and girl needs their melanin activated by the religious institutions. Let them know this is not just a color. This is royalty. Claim it. It doesn't mean you got to think you better than nobody.
Yeah, and that's
but step into your truth. But let me also say, we can't be so careful about what the white man feels, or so careful about what the Arab thinks, or so careful about what the European Jew thinks, that we don't give our children a true history of black divinity, because we're so concerned of how it's going to affect everybody else. Since when has anybody been concerned about how what they do affects us?
So then how
All right, so I think we're going to have to camp out here. I'll let y'all weigh in on this one, and then we'll ride out in the sunset. But I'm gonna come to you first, Chris. You got us, you got us in this bag, man. You want to play that clip? I'm gonna let you take a first stab at it. You got us in this mess.
Yeah, I mean, it's just more the same from him. Hey, I don't need my daughter to feel like she's better than the white person, but the white person can't do justice. Only the black person can do justice. We're the only people that has ever ruled. I'm just like, again, more of this kind of ad hoc. Like, I have no clue where he gets this stuff from. The divinity of melanin, and it's been taken. Where has it been taken out of the book? How do you know it's been taken out of the book? Anyway, those are some of my kind of thoughts. I want to keep it short because I want to give you guys an opportunity to respond to it. And then my dog just came downstairs and wants to go out.
Oh, MJ, what you got, bro?
I mean, Umar Johnson is a racist, man. He's a racist.
Oh.
He is a racist. He has argued he's making an argument by implication, right? The implication of what he's saying is that white people can't or incapable of doing justice because they're white, because their skin is a different color. This is racism, right? And he's given us no solutions for there's no explanatory reason why black people are capable of doing justice. I mean, we have documented evidence of how the Egyptians felt about some of the darker skinned people. Look, we got receipts.
Yeah, we already know.
So we know how they ruled, and they didn't rule with. I mean, they made peace through war, if we could use that term. So the thing about the human race, because that's the only race that exists, is that we have a problem, and the problem is the problem of evil. The problem is the problem of depravity. We're depraved. We seek to rule each other, and what Umar Johnson is prescribing is no different than Mein Kampf, right? He is arguing for a superior race doctrine. I mean, Hitler did the same thing, a supreme race. Herrenvolk.
Yeah.
It's the same. Like, there's nothing new under the sun.
Well, and I think the thing is, like, whether it's intentional or not, like, we ought to take people at their word when appropriate. And so it's like, you can say that you're not a racist. You can say that you don't preach any sort of racial supremacy. But then if you follow that up by saying that black people are the chosen ones of God, that other races are incapable of ruling in a way that's not brutal, that black people are the only ones that can rule with justice. When you say things like, when you start making those kind of distinctions that demonstrate that one race is less capable than another in this particular way and not chosen, then it's like saying, it's like tomato. Like, you can say that you're not a racist. You can say that you're not preaching racial superiority. But when we look at your beliefs, it actually cashes out to some sort of racial superiority. You're saying that this group over here, not being black, they're not chosen. This group over here cannot rule, without brutality. Now, granted, I mean, here's the thing. It's a fallacious argument to say that just because, first of all, I don't even accept the premise that Egypt ruled the world. I think that's silly. There's no historical reason to think that. That's number one. But let's just go on with the argument. Just because you have done something in the past doesn't mean you can do it now. I mean, like, just to say, like, if that was the case then, I don't know why that suggests that today, the only people that can do it would be us. Just because you have done something in the past doesn't mean you can do it now. And just because you haven't done something in the past doesn't mean that you can't do it now. I mean, that's just a fallacious argument. Just because white people haven't done it doesn't mean they can't. I'm just going on his argument. I don't think that whole model holds water anyway, because nothing's going to be fixed until we get, till Jesus returns and the government is upon his shoulders. And until then, I believe that as an expression of his kingdom, God's people ought to be working to exhibit and exude what the kingdom looks like anyway. So his whole model is off regardless. You know what I mean? But I'm just saying it doesn't stack up even under the weight of his own reasoning. I'm saying it just doesn't work. So, like I said, we can camp out here. I'm gonna give you guys a chance to end out with some things, but I just want to get this out. Again, I don't have anything personal against Umar Johnson, Dr. Umar Johnson. I think that what he says resonates with a lot of people, because I do believe that there are real conditions in America today that need repair. There are some real problems with respect to race, specifically racism against Black people and other minorities as well. I think that we're not the only ones under the gun, but nevertheless, there's issues that need to be addressed. I have no problem with that. It's just that, like I say all the time, you can't build a strong community on a foundation of weak ideas. So when you make claims on the one hand, and then you contradict yourself 5 seconds later, when we examine your claims and see how they work together, and we see that those claims aren't coherent, you're not providing me with anything that we can really build our community on. And on top of that, a lot of stuff he says is flat out false. Like, even in his own city, he's talking about what the church is not doing, bro. Go to Epiphany. Shout out to Dr. Eric Mason. Go over to Epiphany, talk to him about what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? Like, go talk to A.R. Bedard about what they're doing out there in New York. You know what I'm saying? Shoot, I'm telling you right now, as a social worker, man, and in my career, particularly working with the homeless, particularly working with people who are disadvantaged, man, one of the go-tos in any community you're in, you know what I'm saying? One of the go-tos, if you need some assistance, they're going to ask you, have you checked with the churches? You know what I'm saying? It's a fact. They're not going to ask you if you checked with the Kemetic school or whatever. They're not going to ask you if you checked with the Hebrew Israelite, camp over. They're not going to ask you that. They're going to ask you, have you checked with the churches? Because the church is known to be out here putting in that work. You know what I'm saying? That's a fact. That's a fact. So he can talk all day long about what the church is or isn't doing. And I recognize, for the sake of clarity, he did say in his interview that when he says Black church, he's referencing not only Christianity, but also Islam and whatever, Black spirituality in general. But in so much as, I'll let them defend themselves from a church standpoint, from a Christian standpoint. If all you're going to offer me is criticisms, loudness, and a lack of logic, you know what I'm saying, logical inconsistency, I'm sorry, you're not a reliable source of information, bro. We need somebody else. You got to sit on the bench, my brother. Get on the bench. You know what I'm saying? Like, somebody, we need a sub. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? Listen, I'm all for, working and grinding in my context for African Americans. That's the context that I'm in. I'm all for the betterment and human flourishing of people in that context. I'm all for it. But bro, you keep missing logical shots. You keep missing shots with respect to logic and reason. We need a sub. I say we call in a sub. Get somebody in there who's going to make some sense and has a consistent worldview from what they claim needs to be done all the way down to the philosophical presuppositions that their claims rest on. You know what I'm saying? So if you can't do that, bro, you got to go. Chris, I'm gonna go with you, man. Then we're gonna end out with MJ.
Okay. Yeah, this was I mentioned it was entertaining earlier. It was entertaining, like one of those Charlie Murphy and Rick James stories, where Rick James tells you that Charlie Murphy knew karate. Yeah, he kicked me. where he's consciously contradicting themselves, and it's like, man, do you actually remember the story? So yeah, it was entertaining in that sense. It was also it was sad. There was a sympathetic aspect of sadness to it, because he toward the end of this interview, he points out, like, hey, Germany just indicted a former secretary of Hitler, and they're going to treat her. They're not going to be dismissive of the crimes that she participated in from back then. They're not going to say, hey, enough time has passed, we're just going to turn a blind eye. And he pointed out the hypocrisy of that here in America, with how they just have this Emmett Till law passed, and yet the woman
I agree.
who actually caused the death of Emmett Till, who's still alive today, there's no intentions, known intentions at the very least, and there's been plenty enough time for them to actually be revealed for them to take any action against her. So they're still willing to turn a blind eye against a person who actually caused the death and the mutilation and death of a person of color. And
that's
yeah,
a legit concern.
You know, there's that's a legit concern. There's legit
Agree.
concerns that are
Totally
behind the advocacy that Dr. Umar Johnson is oriented towards. The problem is Dr. Umar Johnson has no genuine sense of how things should be resolved. In my opinion, you know, he's just offering more of the same, just with us on top, you know. So, and then secondly, he has no real North Star. He doesn't seem to have I don't know where he gets his knowledge of who God is, what God wants, why justice is relevant. None of those things makes any sense to me based on what he says. From what he says, the best I can tell is he seems to have some sort of a Gnostic special knowledge that he attains from the pigment that's in his skin, and the darker the pigment is, the more special knowledge and revelation and capacity and ability that he has, or one has, to be able to address and resolve these issues. And this is the man that wants you to give you his children. If you've listened to him speak about this in the past, he don't even want you to be their parent no more. He wants to set up a school to where you drop your kid off at 5 and he raises them, and he indoctrinates them, and he teaches them. And in his mind, he's going to teach them how to be the God piece of, how to release this special God power privilege that exists within them. So yeah, it's when he starts to get into actually what he believes and why he believes it, or the lack thereof why he believes it, that it becomes like glaringly problematic and concerning, let alone the personal character issues that have come to light about him as an individual, and the inconsistencies in light of his own convictions in and of himself. So yeah, for me, this response video that we're doing is necessary, in part because he has a large following. There are people sending him money. There are people that are genuinely buying into this rhetoric that he's spreading. And so I'm grateful to have friends that are smarter than I am, and that knows a lot of the conscious, because I'm not super versed in conscious community. So I'm grateful to have friends that I know that I can lean on and be like, what are you talking about? Oh, he's talking about the collective black. You know, I'm grateful to have friends that we can put this out. And I can tell you this much. I'm on college campuses. Part of my job as a missionary is I spend my time, and I chose to spend my time on college campuses because I want to impact the next generation. And I'm not trying to raise $1 billion to be able to do that. I'm privileged to be able to just have the voice of people who are coming and sitting and learning about the scriptures and learning how to reflect God. And those people, like one of them texted me this morning and said, I need to see this video, Chris, because I need to understand Dr. Umar Johnson better. So yeah, I'm grateful to have friends. I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thanks for sharing your platform. Thanks for sharing the opportunity with me. I know I didn't add much to it today, but I'm grateful to sit in the presence of such great men of God. There you go.
Here you go, man. You're always welcome, man. You always contributed. MJ, what you got, bro?
Well, I mean, Chris has said a lot, and I agree with my big bro. Dr. Umar is a good case of what you're gonna get in the conscious community. I would just, me, I like to give book recommendations, and the book recommendations that I'm gonna give this is one of my favorite books. This is Black Religion and Black Radicalism by Gaylord S. Wilmore. Defending Black Faith. This is an old school joint. And I would also recommend that everybody get their hands on Urban Apologetics and be looking out for the second edition of Urban Apologetics. So I know we got to wrap up, so I'm just going to give some book recommendations, and hopefully we'll be back to give Umar Johnson another critique.
Oh yeah, you already know, man. My bad. I had some technical difficulties in the back, trying to get squared away there. But yeah, I appreciate y'all as always, man. You know, as I say all the time, can't build a strong community on a foundation of weak ideas. And I'm really, my thing is we can't allow people who are have an incoherent worldview to set the agenda for the church. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we're going to take people's critiques seriously, we need to take them all the way seriously. And so that means I'm going to be examining claims. I'm going to examine the worldview that the person makes the claim to see if there's coherence there. And when there isn't, that's a mark against it. So, but y'all know what it is, man. And once again, you know what I'm saying? Love God, love people, take care of the things that God blesses you with. Hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And if you feel so inclined, support me on Patreon, patreon.com/Adam Coleman. And we out. Peace.